realized is that we needed to create a process first, and then we needed to reach out to our wider network of experts to help us in defining terms. Because it's one thing for us to tap into our expertise as chocolate makers, as export organizations, as importers, and speak to what we know. But in the case of Sophia, Dr. Cardenuto, who defined deforestation for us, is from the University of Victoria in Canada. So we're reaching out to academics, and with the help of Christy Leslie, Dr. Christy Leslie, who wrote the book Cocoa, she's been able to reach out to a wider audience to help us really bring together experts in the industry who have been approached maybe at different times through FCIA and by different members, but to ask for their input and their support in really defining these terms for not just a scientific level, but for everyone in our industry to use some basic terms. And what we're doing is creating sort of a kind of a summary definition or a quick definition for everyone to be able to access, but then asking for sources and support,
references,
and then a technical definition. So we've just now had the first version of the glossary is available to FCI members to provide their feedback. But this is reaching out to some short definitions along with, in some cases, photos. But we're really trying to create a resource for our members, but also for the public, to be able to go on to the FCI website and say, what does this mean? And then if you come to Northwest in future years asking about some of the terms on packaging, well, you know, every maker might have a little bit of a different interpretation and use some different words, but we're all going to be able to speak to those definitions better than how we've been kind of navigating up until now.
I think this also touches on a really interesting point of where are we as an industry? Where are we now? We started somewhere, we've grown, we've evolved, and now we're at a certain point, and this point is requiring that we have common understanding and common language to move forward. If we don't establish this common language, we cannot move forward, we cannot reach the greater audience, we cannot grow, fine chocolate making, we can't, more farmers who add value to their cacao, they're not going to have a market if we don't actually have a common understanding of this language. And this isn't only happening with us, with fine chocolate, this has happened before. Look at the Specialty Coffee Association, look at craft breweries, look at the Specialty Cheese Guild. I mean, look at these craft and specialty markets. They all have glossaries, they have grading systems with defined terms. It's natural that we have this next step in the process, and it's natural that we want to involve our fine chocolate community in getting their perspectives for what's important so that we can create this together.
At Source, what we mean is we have relationships with everyone we work with. We know everyone we work with. It doesn't mean we do every single step in the value chain that gets the cocoa to us. But I've heard other people, when they say directly sourced, what it means is they have to, you are going to a farmer and you're buying from a farmer, and then you get the beans you brought to yourself from that farmer. That was a very complicated way to put it. And so, like, in that case, the only people who are doing direct sourcing are, like, Maru in Vietnam, or people who are in country, or it means you're only buying from very large, very wealthy farms, which is not something that we're excited about. Like, I mean, we buy from a variety of farms, but I think, like, the notion that in order to direct source means you can't buy from somebody who has a very small amount of land. So, a lot of times people say farmer, and what they mean is fermenter, right? Or, so even these terms can get very conflated because, like, Simran is not a farmer.
No. Actually,
hopefully that wasn't a big reveal.
Actually, and it's not uncommon for us to buy cocoa from a farmer, and the farmer's the person who owns the land, but he or she may have a couple other people who are working on the land. So, is the farmer the person who owns the cocoa farm, or is it the person who does the work on the cocoa farm? If only there was a way to define these.
Is there a way?
I'm not sure. What do you think? Is there a way to define these things? That's really the question that we have here. Is there a way to define these things? Where are we in this process?
Yeah, so I think that might actually segue a little bit nicely into a description of how.
Part of the reason it's important that an organization like FCIA does this, in the past, within craft chocolate, some of you in the room have been in these conversations we've had where we've tried to define terms. I think the challenge we always run into is you need impartiality when you're defining terms, because what normally happens is everybody wants the term defined in the way that sort of like that shines the best light on them. And so you get into these discussions where the terms get kind of contorted around what someone specifically does. And so it's important to have an impartial organization that says, like, you know, they're not saying a chocolate maker is better than a chocolatier or a chocolatier is better than a chocolate maker. Like, I think there's a lot of times that people are sort of applying like value to these terms, not just definitions, but they're saying like, this means I'm doing something better. Is ethically sourced better than direct sourced? You know, they're just two different terms, and like once you understand what those two terms are, you'll have a better understanding of like, when I'm buying this is what I'm getting. But it doesn't mean one is good and one is bad, it just means they're different things. And I think it's really important to have an organization that isn't trying to say this is good and this is bad, it's just trying to say, here are different terms.
I think that part of our process in the value chain committee, we are a group of producer organizations, importers, chocolate makers, and chocolatiers, which means that we are asking producers to define the term producer, which is important for representation and inclusivity, which is why we are a broad and a vast-reaching organization. FCIA is not just chocolate makers and chocolatiers. It makes up people all around the world, and we're really trying to reach into that so that there's, you know, including something like a producer in Nicaragua versus a producer in Ghana are gonna have two different experiences. We're also including fermentation, not just fermentation as a definition, but box fermentation, heat fermentation, so that people understand that there are differences. And just to Greg's point, they are differences, and we're not trying to place a value on them, we're just trying to be clear so that our customers can make a better understanding.
There are a lot of things that we hold similar, and I think that we need to focus on the similarities and to celebrate the differences and not become more fractured over it, because there's a lot that we can do together and we can move this forward when we work together.
Let's say that, you know, this is taking too long. It's taking long because we're doing it right. We're not rushing it. We're not trying to slap words together. And so that clarity and accuracy in the process and being documented properly matters.